This is also a time of change for my family. Catherine becomes Queen Consort. In recognition of her own loyal public service, I know she will bring to the demands of her new role.
No trumpet sounded. No balcony appearance followed. No palace aide rushed to explain what had happened. Yet behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace, one quiet order shifted the emotional balance of the monarchy. Princess Catherine had been handed the ceremonial gold key of Buckingham Palace, the private palace honor Queen Camilla cherished most. And the silence around it made the moment feel even more devastating. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine did not reach for the velvet case at first. She stood in the private room as if the air itself had changed, watching a senior courtier place it before her with the careful respect usually reserved for something far heavier than gold. The ceremonial gold key of Buckingham Palace, in plain terms, was not a normal key for opening doors. It was a symbolic household honor, a sign that the palace trusted one person with private access, quiet influence, and a place near the heart of royal life. Catherine understood that meaning instantly. She also understood who had just lost it. Camilla had cherished that honor, because it gave her something titles alone could not give. It placed her beside Charles not only as his wife, but as a woman accepted inside the most private rhythm of the palace. For years, the Queen Consort had carried the weight of public judgment, private whispers, and old comparisons that never fully disappeared. The gold key had told her that Buckingham Palace saw her as more than a controversial figure. It told her she belonged. Now Catherine's name had been entered as the new ceremonial holder, and Camilla's had been removed. Charles knew the order would wound her. He sat behind his desk with the signed instruction already complete, his pen resting beside the page like a final verdict. When a senior aide asked whether the decision should be delayed, the king did not raise his voice. He simply set the pen down and said, "The household must know where the future stands." The words were calm, but they carried the force of a door closing. Charles was not only giving Catherine an honor, he was naming the person the palace trusted to carry its next chapter. Camilla learned the truth. After the decision had already been sealed, she did not shout. She did not demand the file. She sat very still, her face drained of its usual control, while the aide explained that Catherine had been informed first. That detail cut deeper than the transfer itself. For Camilla, the pain was not only losing the gold key, it was realizing that the palace had moved without asking her permission. Catherine felt no victory in that moment. She looked down at the velvet case and saw responsibility, not triumph. Yet somewhere behind this silent appointment was another story, one hidden palace moment that had pushed Charles toward a choice no one could undo. But before Catherine could understand why the honor had come to her, the palace had to face the people wounded most by its transfer. The gold key was never just metal. In the palace, it carried memory, status, trust, and the silent approval of the crown. For Catherine, it arrived like a burden wrapped in velvet. For Camilla, it felt like a public humiliation delivered in private. And for the monarchy, it became the first visible sign that the future was no longer waiting politely outside the door. Catherine kept her hands close to her side before she finally asked the question no one in the room wanted to answer. "Has Camilla been told?" Her voice stayed soft, but the silence around her became heavy. The crown, in simple terms, meant more than the king himself. It meant the royal system, the duties, the household, and the symbols that told the country who held trust. Catherine understood that accepting the gold key meant accepting more than a private honor. She was stepping into a place Camilla had believed was safely hers. William watched Catherine absorb the news, and he knew at once that this was not a small household adjustment. The prince had seen enough palace decisions to recognize when a quiet change carried a louder message. He looked at the velvet case, then at his wife, and his face tightened with concern. Catherine was not glowing with triumph. She looked careful, almost troubled, because she knew success inside the palace often came with someone else's suffering attached to it. Charles carried the deepest wound because he had signed the order himself. The king knew the decision protected the future, but he also knew it would hurt the woman who had stood beside him through storms, criticism, and years of uneasy acceptance. Camilla had spent so long trying to prove she belonged at the center of royal life. The gold key had become her quiet proof. Losing it did not simply remove a symbol. It reopened every old fear that the palace had accepted her title without fully accepting her heart. Camilla sat alone in Clarence's house when the confirmation came. Her tea cooled untouched beside her, as an aide explained that Catherine's name had already entered the household register. A household register, in plain language, is the palace record that notes official roles, duties, and ceremonial responsibilities. The queen consort heard the words, but she did not respond at first. Then she asked the question that revealed the wound beneath her calm. "Did the princess know before me?" The aide hesitated. That pause hurt more than any answer could have. Camilla looked away, and in that small silence, the whole transfer became personal. Catherine had not stolen the honor, but the timing made it feel like the palace had chosen her, while Camilla was still standing in the room. William understood that hesitation would echo. Charles understood it too, and Catherine, though not present at Clarence's house, would soon feel its force. Because beneath this quiet transfer was an older incident, one involving Catherine, Camilla, and a palace ceremony that changed the king's view of trust forever. To understand why Charles allowed the gold key to leave Camilla's hands, the story must return to the ceremony where the fracture first became impossible to ignore. Every royal crisis has a moment people remember too late. A sentence spoken too sharply, a gesture made in the wrong room, a silence that becomes evidence. For this palace honor, the trigger came during the Windsor household reception, when Camilla publicly corrected Catherine over the order of entry into the East Gallery. That single moment changed the way Charles saw everything. Camilla stepped forward before Catherine could enter, and the movement was small enough to look controlled but sharp enough to wound. The Windsor household reception, in plain words, was a formal palace gathering where selected guests, aides, and royal figures moved through carefully planned greetings. The East Gallery was one of the grand palace rooms used for important arrivals, so the order of entry mattered because it showed who carried authority in that moment. Catherine had been asked by Charles to greet the visiting delegation first. That made Camilla's interruption more than awkward. It made it look like a challenge to the king's own private instruction. Catherine heard the correction and did not fight back. Camilla told her, in front of senior aides, that palace precedence still has a mistress. Palace precedence simply means the order in which royal people appear, speak, or move during formal events, and inside the monarchy, that order can speak louder than a public statement. As Catherine lowered her eyes, stepped back, and allowed the silence to do what anger never could. She looked hurt, but she stayed composed. Camilla saw that restraint, yet she did not understand its power until it was too late. William saw Catherine's face change. The prince did not interrupt the reception, but he carried that moment with him long after the guests moved on. Later, in a private conversation with Charles recorded in a confidential household note, William told the king that humiliation inside the family could be more dangerous than criticism outside it. Charles listened without defending Camilla. He understood the warning because Catherine had not embarrassed the crown. She had protected it, even while being wounded by someone standing under the same roof. Camilla realized too late that the people who mattered had noticed everything. The senior aides had not reacted openly, but their silence became a record of its own. The queen consort had wanted to defend her place, yet in doing so, she had made Catherine appear steadier, calmer, and more loyal to the king's instruction. That contrast became impossible for Charles to ignore. Charles asked for a private review of household ceremonial honors the very next morning. The review was simple in meaning. The king wanted to know which palace symbols still matched the future he needed to protect. That request began the path that led to Catherine receiving the gold key. Camilla never expected Catherine to speak about Windsor, and Catherine never did. But silence became her strongest testimony, and when the decision finally reached Camilla, the buried humiliation of Windsor returned with enough force to ignite the confrontation everyone feared. The confrontation did not happen beneath chandeliers before rows of courtiers. It happened in a smaller palace sitting room, where every breath felt louder than protocol. Camilla entered first, wounded and controlled. Catherine stood near the window, calm but pale. Between them sat the velvet case containing the gold key. Neither woman touched it. Both knew it had already changed everything. Camilla looked at Catherine and asked the question like a blade wrapped in silk. "Did you want it?" The gold key, in simple words, was not used like an ordinary key. It was a palace honor that showed private trust, personal access, and the belief that one royal figure could carry the household's quiet confidence. Catherine knew that meaning. Camilla knew it better. That was why the queen consort's voice shook, even as she tried to sound calm. Catherine answered without pride, She said she had not asked for the honor, but she would not refuse a duty given by Charles. The king's instruction mattered, because royal duty was not treated like a personal gift. Once the monarch placed responsibility on someone, refusing it could look like rejecting the crown itself. Catherine understood that danger, and Camilla understood it too. Still, the answer did not soothe her. It only made the wound feel official. Camilla stepped closer to the velvet case, then stopped. Her hand hovered above it for one painful second, as if touching it would prove the loss was real. She said the honor had been one of the few palace traditions that made her feel accepted instead of merely tolerated. The queen consort had survived years of judgment, old comparisons, and whispers that never fully faded. The gold key had given her a private answer to all of it. Now Catherine stood where that answer used to be. Catherine's calm finally cracked. She told Camilla that acceptance could not be built by making another woman feel small. The words landed hard because both women knew exactly what she meant. Windsor was in the room with them, even though no one had spoken its name. The reception, the correction, the frozen aides, the moment Catherine stepped back instead of fighting back. Camilla had thought silence would bury it. Instead, silence had preserved it. Camilla stared at her, and the accusation in her face slowly turned into fear. Catherine revealed, through a private household briefing shared with her after the transfer, that the Windsor incident had been reviewed by Charles and senior aides. The king had acted because the palace saw more than Camilla realized. That truth changed the room. This was no secret victory. It was a judgment. William entered just after the door opened. He saw Catherine standing still, Camilla turned away, and the velvet case untouched between them. The prince understood instantly that the gold key had become more than an honor. It had become a family wound. Yet the argument between Catherine and Camilla was only the surface. The real power lay with the person who had signed the transfer and refused to unsign it. King Charles did not raise his voice. That made the decision more final. In the private office where royal habits become royal history, he sat with the household file open before him and read Catherine's name beside the gold key. Camilla wanted reassurance. William wanted clarity. Catherine wanted peace. But Charles understood something none of them could escape. Symbols decide who people trust. Charles held the authority because the gold key belonged to the private household traditions of Buckingham Palace. In plain words, private household traditions are the quiet customs inside royal residences that shape access, ceremony, and personal trust away from public speeches. His signature made the transfer final, because the monarch's approval turns a palace recommendation into an official decision. The king knew that once Catherine's name entered that record, the palace would not see her the same way again. William knew it too, and that was why the prince stood across from him without interrupting. Charles looked tired, not weak. The king understood succession planning, which simply means preparing the monarchy for the people who will carry it next. This was not only about Catherine receiving a beautiful symbol. It was about placing her visibly inside the trusted inner rhythm of the crown, before crisis forced the palace to do it in panic. William wanted that future protected, but he also knew Camilla would see the move as rejection. Catherine wanted peace, yet peace had become impossible, because the gold key now carried the weight of judgment. Camilla's pain deepened, because Charles was not punishing her in public. He was correcting her in private, and that made it harder to fight. The queen consort could not stand before the world and complain that she had lost a symbol few people fully understood. She could only feel the loss inside rooms where everyone knew exactly what it meant. Charles loved her, but affection could not erase what Windsor had revealed. The king had seen Catherine humiliated, and had seen Catherine remain steady. Charles closed the folder and removed his glasses. He looked at William and said, "The monarchy must recognize steadiness before crisis demands it." The words landed with quiet force. William did not celebrate them. The prince understood that his wife had gained trust through pain, and Camilla had lost ground through one moment of wounded pride. That contrast was what made the decision so heavy. Charles had already received advice from senior household figures in a documented internal account prepared after Windsor. They told the king that Catherine's restraint had proved stronger than Camilla's claim to seniority. Charles did not need to be persuaded twice. He had signed because the palace had shown him where the future stood. Camilla sensed that the decision could not be undone, but she was not ready to accept defeat. The queen consort began preparing for the first official palace event after the transfer, determined to test whether Catherine's new place could survive in public. Once Catherine's name entered the register, the palace could no longer hide the consequences, and the first public duty after the transfer became the moment everyone watched. The first event after the transfer was supposed to be routine: a palace reception, a line of guests, a carefully arranged entrance. But nothing felt routine when Catherine arrived at Buckingham Palace, and a senior usher bowed to her before opening the inner doors. Across the room, Camilla saw the gesture. Her face did not collapse. It hardened. That was worse. Catherine moved forward with controlled grace, but she felt every eye turned toward her. The palace reception, in plain words, was a formal gathering where guests were welcomed by senior royals before entering the main staterooms, the grand public rooms used for official ceremonies and royal events. The ceremonial route mattered because it showed who had trusted access to the palace's inner order. Catherine had not asked to be guided that way, but the staff adjusted instantly, and that adjustment made the transfer impossible to hide. Camilla watched the usher wait for Catherine's signal before opening the doors. The queen consort had once stood in that exact place, feeling the quiet power of being recognized by the household before the guests even noticed. Now she felt that same power move past her. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The bow, the pause, the open door, the changed order of movement, all of it told Camilla that the palace had accepted Catherine's new position before Camilla had accepted losing it. William saw the pain before anyone else spoke. The prince placed a steadying hand at Catherine's back, not to push her forward, but to remind her she was not carrying the moment alone. Catherine kept her face calm, yet her heart tightened because every step she took seemed to deepen Camilla's humiliation. Success should have felt like recognition. Instead, it felt like walking through another woman's grief, while the whole room pretended not to see. Camilla's fingers tightened around her evening bag as Catherine passed. The queen consort did not look away quickly enough. Catherine noticed. William noticed. Charles noticed from farther inside the room, and the king's expression shifted with quiet regret. He had known the reception would reveal the truth, but knowing pain was coming did not make it easier to watch. The decision had protected the future, yet it had wounded the present in full view of the household. Camilla broke from the planned receiving line before the guests departed. She moved toward Charles and asked to speak with him privately. The king held her gaze, then refused with one low sentence. "Not now." Those two words landed like another locked door. Camilla had to return to her place and stand through the rest of the evening, while Catherine carried the honor she had lost. That refusal did not end the fallout. It pushed the pain into the only place protocol could not control: a private conversation with no aides, no files, and no escape. After the reception, the palace emptied slowly, but the emotional noise remained. Camilla did not go to the aides. Catherine did not retreat to William. Instead, the two women found themselves in a quiet corridor outside the garden room, separated from the machinery that had turned one honor into a battlefield. For the first time, there was no audience, only truth. Camilla stopped first, as if the weight of the evening had finally caught her. The garden room, in plain words, was one of the quieter palace rooms used for smaller private moments away from the larger ceremonial spaces. That mattered because this conversation could not survive another audience. Catherine knew it too. She had spent the evening carrying the gold key with dignity, but dignity had not protected either woman from pain. Camilla looked at her and, for once, did not sound royal. She sounded wounded. Camilla admitted that losing the gold key felt like losing the last proof that Buckingham Palace had truly accepted her. The queen consort did not say it as a challenge. She said it like someone finally confessing the fear beneath years of control. Catherine listened without interrupting, because she understood that the honor had not been only about access or rank. For Camilla, it had been a shield against every old whisper that still followed her name through royal history. Catherine answered with quiet resolve. She told Camilla that the honor was not a weapon unless they allowed pain to turn it into one. The princess did not soften the truth, but she did not sharpen it either. She knew the palace had placed trust in her, and she knew that trust mattered, because the monarchy needed a future figure who could stay calm under pressure. Yet Catherine also knew another truth. A future built on humiliation would never feel clean. Camilla finally spoke of Windsor. The queen consort acknowledged that her correction at the reception had wounded Catherine more deeply than she had allowed herself to see. She did not call it an apology, but the admission carried the shape of one. Catherine opened the velvet case slowly, not to display victory, but to place the gold key between them on a small table. That gesture changed the meaning of the room. It said the honor would not be used to erase Camilla. Catherine revealed her intention through a private conversation, later recorded in a confidential household account. She would carry the gold key as service, not triumph. She would not use it to diminish Camilla's years beside Charles, and she would not pretend the queen consort's pain was invisible. Camilla heard that and looked away, but her face had changed. The anger had lost its sharpest edge. Camilla left without grand words. Catherine remained behind for a moment, steady but shaken, knowing peace had not been restored, only rescued from collapse. Yet private understanding could not stop the outside world from discovering the shift, and once the story reached the public, the palace lost control of the meaning. By morning, the silence was gone. The palace had tried to keep the transfer quiet, but symbols do not stay hidden when staff bows change, doors open differently, and cameras catch what courtiers avoid saying. The nation woke to a single image, Catherine entering Buckingham Palace through the ceremonial inner doors, while Camilla stood several steps behind her. That photograph became the story. Catherine saw the front page before breakfast had fully begun. The headline was impossible to soften: "The Princess with the Palace Key." A newspaper front page, in simple words, is the first page people see before reading any detail, so it can turn a private moment into a national judgment within seconds. Catherine did not smile. She understood why the photograph mattered. It showed more than a door opening. It showed the palace recognizing her before the public had even been told what had changed. Camilla saw the same paper on a breakfast tray and pushed it aside without reading the article. The queen consort did not need the words. The picture had already spoken. For her, the pain came from how clear it looked to everyone else. Catherine stood near the ceremonial inner doors with the calm of someone being received by the household. Camilla stood behind her, close enough to be seen, but far enough to look displaced. That distance became the wound. A major morning broadcaster made the moment even harder to contain. The presenter described it as the clearest sign yet that the monarchy's emotional center is moving toward Catherine. The phrase mattered because the monarchy's emotional center meant the person the public quietly trusts to represent dignity, steadiness, and family feeling. Catherine had not asked for that label, but once it was spoken aloud, it wrapped itself around her. Camilla heard it later through a recorded broadcast summary prepared for the household, and the words cut deeper than the headline. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace before noon. Some people held flowers. Others simply watched the gates, waiting for another sign that the photograph had captured something real. Catherine felt the pressure of that public approval because every cheer for her sounded, in some hidden way, like rejection of Camilla. The princess knew praise could be its own burden when it rose from another woman's loss. Charles refused to let the palace correct the story. The king allowed no denial, no alternate explanation, no careful statement pretending the transfer had been misunderstood. That silence became confirmation. William understood the risk, but the prince also understood the power of restraint. Once the palace said nothing, the country heard everything. Camilla remained behind closed doors while the story moved without her. Catherine remained composed while the story lifted her higher than she wanted to stand. And when the noise faded and the headlines settled, only one question remained inside the palace. What had this quiet transfer truly revealed about the crown? In the end, Catherine did not celebrate. That is why the moment endured. She had taken Queen Camilla's most prized palace honor, but she did not turn it into conquest. She carried it like a responsibility, heavy with the pain of another woman and the expectation of a waiting nation. The gold key did not simply open palace doors. It closed an older chapter of royal power. Catherine understood what the appointment truly meant only after the noise faded. The gold key, in simple terms, was the palace's quiet symbol of trust, access, and confidence, not a common object of ceremony. For her, receiving it proved that calm discipline could carry more power than open ambition. She had not demanded the honor. She had not fought Camilla for it. She had simply remained steady when the palace watched her suffer, and that steadiness became impossible to ignore. Camilla felt the loss differently now. The queen consort had first seen it as rejection, but the final truth was harsher and clearer. Belonging to the palace did not mean controlling its future. She had stood beside Charles through years of storms, and that history still mattered. Yet the monarchy had reached a point where loyalty to the past could not outweigh trust in what came next. Camilla had not been erased. but she had been moved from the center of the story she once believed was hers. Charles stood alone before the palace windows and watched Catherine cross the courtyard with the velvet case held close. The king knew the decision had been both merciful and ruthless. Merciful because it gave the monarchy the steadiness it needed before another crisis demanded it. Ruthless because it wounded Camilla in a place no public title could heal. Charles had chosen the future, but he did not look like a man enjoying victory. He looked like a monarch carrying the cost of his own judgment. William saw Catherine's strength more clearly than anyone. The prince understood that she had not defeated Camilla by force. She had refused to humiliate her after receiving the honor, and that restraint mattered more than the appointment itself. William knew the future royal order, meaning the planned structure of duties and influence for the monarchy's next chapter, would depend on more than titles. It would depend on who could carry pain without turning it into spectacle. Catherine's final power came from what she did not do. She did not gloat. She did not explain herself through a public statement. She did not let applause harden into pride. The monarchy did not choose her because she shouted for recognition. It chose her because she absorbed pressure, silence, and judgment without breaking the dignity expected of the crown. Camilla's wounded pride had spoken loudly in private, but Catherine's silence spoke louder in history. The gold key became the symbol of a new royal order, one where the palace quietly admitted that its future had already entered the room. No further mystery remained. The palace had made its choice. Catherine had accepted the weight. Camilla had felt the cost, and the monarchy had shown the world that its next chapter would not arrive with noise, but with one silent key placed into the right hands. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.